Death of a Unicorn is the latest A24 horror comedy starring Jenna Ortega. She's paired up alongside Paul Rudd, who plays her father in the movie. The pair are traveling to a business meeting that is very important to Paul Rudd, the father, when out of nowhere, they hit a unicorn with their car and now must decide what to do with it. And that's all. Putting aside any spoilers, you guys, this will be a spoiler-free review. Death of a Unicorn. You know, the A24 name is such an interesting one because I feel like it's one of the only studios right now where you say, oh, it's an A24 movie. You already have a predetermined bias on maybe what the movie will look like or what it'll feel like. And you can't really say that for many other studios, right? You can be like, oh, that one's a Paramount movie. Oh, that's a Lionsgate. Oh, a Warner Brothers film. Okay, you probably thought that one's disappearing for tax purposes. But admittedly, where we stand right now, A24 has put themselves on this pedestal that a lot of movie fans respect, and there's a certain expectation when going into an A24 movie. So I think this, to me, is kind of why I'm seeing such a huge divide in the overall reaction for when people go watch Death of a Unicorn. And before going in to watch the movie, a lot of my mutual peeps that I really respect and sometimes really align with when it comes to thoughts on movies, they were saying they didn't like it, that they just could not get into it. And I was like, oh, dang. So this gonna be an A24 dud for me. Jenna Ortega, Paul Rudd. I was expecting magic. Went to see the movie, sat down, witnessed it. Baby, I felt that unicorn horn and quite enjoyed it. Yeah, maybe I had set my expectations so low seeing some of those early reactions, but I was pleasantly surprised with Death of a Unicorn, and maybe it's just being mismarketed and setting the wrong expectations for a lot of other people. So let me get into the things I really enjoyed about this movie. Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega's father and daughter, I think they work well. The movie sets up a backstory for why they kind of have a troubled relationship and why the dad is struggling to really be in the daughter's life. There were at times I wish their relationship wasn't as cliched as just the father and daughter that don't get along and they're bickering back and forth. But I think when it comes to the end of the movie, they really wrap up that relationship so nicely, and it does become very heartwarming. When it came to the involvement of the unicorn and the way it's used in the story, so we knew from the trailers and the early plot details of this movie that not only do they just hit a unicorn, but they find out this unicorn is actually the cure for cancer, and they have to decide whether to kill it and ruin something unique to save a bunch of people or let it live, but then not cure cancer in the process, right? And so I remember that premise and seeing that being set up in the trailers and thinking, wow, it's probably going to be a very kind of profound, serious look and a commentary on the medical field and the way they do kind of abuse a lot of needed medicine for money, right? And it does have those elements, but it's played up in such a satirical way that it's enjoyable. It's like kind of effed up because it's like, I know you guys are joking and laughing about how y'all are going to become filthy rich through this unicorn stuff curing cancer, but everything they're saying and talking about probably actually would happen. Like there's a line in the movie where a guy goes, there goes all the cancer charities, bye-bye. And just seeing that process unfold in real time through that satirical lens, I was thoroughly entertained. It wasn't as deadly serious as you needed to be because at the end of the day, it's a freaking unicorn giving you this cure, but more because of the brand of humor. And I think that's the other thing that is going to hold this movie back from some people is the way the humor runs in this movie. It's very dry pan, serious, line after line. I found it extremely funny, but it's looking like for a lot of people, they just did not find this movie funny. And that surprises me. The best way I can describe the way the humor works in this movie is, you know, the kind of character Jason Bateman plays in a lot of his movies. Love Jason Bateman, by the way. But when he's playing the funny straight man, who obviously isn't the Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, or Adam Sandler type, right? Where they kind of go a little crazy or really out there with their humor. No, it's more laid back, very serious and dry. Picture that Jason Bateman character, but literally every person in the movie is doing that humor. I think it works well when Jason Bateman is thrown in an ensemble and you have other crazy characters and, you know, he's the straight guy. But if you throw a movie where everybody's the Jason Bateman type, I don't think you have that big balance, and I think that's what throws off some people. But I was able to get a huge laugh out of it, especially because the MVP of this movie, the man that had me dying all throughout this film, and he stole the show anytime he was on screen, Will Poulter. Yes, he's come a long way from being crazy eyebrow kid in We're the Millers. His glow up has happened, and I look up to him and go, he got that glow up. One day that glow up gonna be mine too. But we saw him in Guardians of the Galaxy as Adam Warlock, and he had some decent comedic moments. In this movie, Death of a Unicorn, he is given some of the funniest lines, some of the funniest situations, and anytime his character was saying or doing something, I just ate it up. He's got really good comedic timing, but it's his facial expressions and even his mannerisms when saying something. Now, the movie is being branded as a horror comedy, so let's talk about the horror elements, because I think, again, that's another thing where an expectation is set and you're disappointed with what you get. I guess you can categorize this as a horror movie because people die in horrific ways thanks to a unicorn. I mean, the trailer flat out shows you a scene of someone getting impaled with a bloody hole left behind, but it's honestly, to tell you, I wouldn't categorize this as a horror movie. I would only be okay with it, like I said, because there are deaths in this movie, but they're all played up for laughs. They're very ridiculous. Props on the movie trailers for this film, not really giving away much of the look of the unicorns, but when you go see this, unicorns aren't hidden that much. Once you start seeing them, they're very prominent in the movie, and whether you like the CGI or not, they don't really begin to hide the unicorns, and I guess that could end up making the movie feel slightly cartoony and take away some of that horror factor. It's also that slightly disappointing thing where a lot of the kills have an overuse of CGI and fake blood, and that kind of stuff always takes me out. Yeah, it's pretty funny to see like two unicorns maybe rip someone apart, but when that person resembles a graphic in a PS3 game, kind of just goes, okay, I guess that was a cool kill. So please, if you're wanting to watch this movie because you think it's probably going to be a pretty fun horror movie, it is a funny horror movie, but I think the horror elements are so limited in this movie, I'd barely categorize it as a horror film. In fact, I've been seeing a lot of comparisons to like Jurassic Park. People have been calling this kind of like the Jurassic Park of unicorn movies. I for sure see in a couple of sequences why people say that, because it does give off Jurassic Park vibes. But in my mind, although there's actual death, blood, and horrific kills in here, I would say Jurassic Park has much more of a horror tone than this movie does. And I guess that brings me to some of my negatives, where I'm not just going to acknowledge why I think some people didn't like that movie, but what I didn't really enjoy. Some of the logical plot elements, I get we're being satirical and kind of funny with this whole unicorn plot, but towards the end of the movie, it really started getting just random and silly, and especially like the final 2 minutes of this movie, I was just kind of like, that's kind of cheesy, and I don't think that's really going to work out for those characters, but sure, end it that way. I love Jenna Ortega also, but I feel like she was a little one-dimensional in this movie. I kind of would have liked a little more. She really just ends up playing the moody teenager with the righteous attitude. And maybe you could say the same for Paul Rudd, but I feel like there was an intriguing factor on why he was acting the way he does and the dilemma he was kind of put in as a father wanting to provide for his daughter and his single family while also trying to deal with the moral implications of this unicorn and letting it die. That's, I guess, also where the movie really fails in, because you have such a really interesting premise where you do have that moral intrigue, and since it's played up for laughs most of the time, you don't really get to dive in to those moral dilemmas and give us maybe a more deeper story. I would say this story is pretty straightforward. The A24 banner might make you think it's more prestige and serious. I think this is just one of their kind of dumb fun movies. And that's just not something you kind of expect when you hear an A24 movie was dumb fun. So when it comes to Death of a Unicorn, I'm going to give action 2.5 stars. It's a one location kind of movie, this mansion slash compound where they keep the unicorn and then it starts going crazy. Comedy in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I was pretty happy with the humor in this movie. Although Will Poulter is the standout, there were other characters that had me dying. The mom was also super funny. But granted, it's the type of humor I guess just not everybody finds funny. Drama in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I think there was enough of an emotional story between Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega's character. I quite enjoyed the satirical take on how a pharmaceutical company would probably start handling the fact that they just discovered the cure from cancer. I do sometimes wish, though, they went a little deeper with it and explored that moral dilemma, but it's kind of really at a surface level. Horror in the movie, I'll give 2 stars to. It's not particularly a scary movie, and the unicorns look fine. Yes, some people die in pretty horrific, but because it's mainly played up for laughs, I don't think the deaths are all that impactful. And suspense of the movie, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. There is a point where you are wondering what decisions some characters are gonna make or what the outcome will be with these unicorns, but a lot of the sillier tone kind of holds that back. Casual moviegoers into Death of a Unicorn, I'm gonna give it a B-. I really do think the A24 banner and it being branded as a horror movie is unfortunately gonna set some people up for disappointment with that. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it a B+, and critically, I'm going to give it a B-. I honestly ended up having quite a bit of fun with Death of a Unicorn, and for that reason, I think it's worth watching in theaters. Again, that's just my opinion on the movie, guys. I'd love to know your opinion. If you got around to seeing this movie, did it meet your expectations? Why do you think it's such a divisive movie that some people do love it and don't love it? Anything and everything, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.